Can I ask you, did anybody looking for seconds? There's nobody looking for seconds, Wasn't it a lovely meal? Oh, fantastic. Thank you very much. We've got a few things to move on to complete the afternoon. But first of all, we have a bit of a history session. Now, as I put on this bit of regalia here, and State Chairman Paul might have looked around the church and said, I don't know what's wrong with the Knights in Bendigo, but they're not wearing regalia. But I think I can go back a number of years to, we had a very progressive man called Ian Bell. Ian Bell set us straight and said, okay, we want you to wear this at meetings to show that you're in an authority position, but it's much more modern than the regalia that was been in the Knights for 100 years. Thank you. But the history of the Knights, I'm going to call on two stalwarts of our branch, Brother Brian Bourke and Brother Len Fitzgerald.
Len Chalkley.
No, Len Chalkley, sorry.
Len Fitzgerald has died.
Brother Len, sorry. His dear wife's in here. Yes, he's looking after us. He's probably making sure that I don't make a mistake, but I have made a mistake. But these two gentlemen will give us a little bit of the history of the Knights, and I call on Brother Brian Bourke to come forward, please.
Good afternoon.
Thanks very much, Tom. My brother Tom. Sorry about that. Yeah, so when we look at this, the symbol on the screen, it's the symbol of an organisation that was born out of adversity. And it's a little bit of that adversity that gives it the inner strength when it started. And it came about because of the antagonism between the people from Ireland and the people from England. In other words, the British people came out and established themselves, and they were in positions of some authority. And the next transportees were the people from Ireland, and they were predominantly Catholics. And there was a suspicion between the two, and that also, the antagonism that existed in Britain also was transported over here. So we found ourselves in a situation where there was some animosity about it. Because the British people had owned the establishments, the Irish and the Catholics, of course, were envious, I suppose, but not envious is the wrong word, because they were at a distinct disadvantage. And that disadvantage was showed itself in all sorts of ways. The antagonism of the two, especially, and then the unions, the workers, the people in the establishments formed unions, and out of that grew a government party known as the Labour Party. The Labour Party were envious, and not just envious, but were fearful of the Catholics. And because they were fearful of it, they found that some of them had, some of the Catholics had been encouraged by the bishop of the day to join the trade unions, and as a consequence they found themselves in the government party. The government didn't like that, and further antagonism occurred when the Duke of York visiting Sydney, and he suffered a minor injury from a Catholic youth who was a bit over exuberant, and that really set the antagonism to a new level, because they felt that the Catholics, you've got to really watch them because they're starting to rise and increase in strength, and they become a greater threat in the eyes of the British who were in the establishments. So, in the consequence of all this, the government of the day predominantly was encouraged and supported by the Orange State, as they call themselves, and the Masons and a few of those other groups proposed and passed a law that no Catholics would be allowed in the Labor Party. They were to be excluded. And not only that, anybody or any organisation which supported Catholics being in the Labor Party or in positions of power would also be penalised. So there's a position that arrived when the anti-Catholic movement was quite strong, but also any Protestant organisation that was sort of reasonably sympathetic, they dare not appear to be supporting the Catholics for the penalty that would be imposed on them also. So you've got those two situations. One, there's a danger that if they support them, they'll penalise themselves. The other is, we don't want to support them anyway. We don't want the Catholics to get any additional power. And so that's where we started to see the sign of positions vacant, but no Catholics need apply. Motivated mainly because we don't want the Catholics to get into the position, but on the contrary, if you did have a sympathetic employer, he also suffered penalties himself if he employed the Catholics. And so it was a very strong resentment to the Catholics, and supported, not the Catholics, but the position of opposition to Catholics was supported by a number of organisations, and those who were, especially the members of the Orange Lodges and the Masonic Lodge and a few of those other lodges. So that was a situation that existed in New South Wales and Victoria around about in the lead up to 1919. Also, the elections provided a bit of battleground for Catholics and non-Catholics, and an Education Act was passed to abolish state aid to denominational schools. Because what had happened, of course, these missionaries had come across and they'd set up denominational schools, and those schools were being very, very successful. And that's one thing that they didn't want to see, was the success of this new education system. And they certainly didn't want to see them receiving any funds. So that placed more antagonism. In the 1915 conference, tensions with, I just mentioned that, that was in 1915, the tensions within the Labor Party increased, and they passed this resolution that no Catholics were allowed to stay. A small group of active Catholic men resolved to meet this challenge to their integrity and self-respect, and to take whatever action was open to them to rectify this situation. And in this climate, the order was formed. Now, I missed a couple of steps there, but just wanted to say that that's how and why it all began. Of its early progress and any achievement, we have little records available. But the Order of the Knights of the Southern Cross was founded in Sydney in 1919 with the approval of the hierarchy of the Catholic Church in Australia, and was named the Knights of the Southern Cross and was officially adopted at a general meeting on the 7th of July 1919 in Sydney. A similar organisation, because a similar situation was occurring in Melbourne, a similar organisation was formed in Melbourne, and the Knights of the Order of, for instance, Xavier, was composed of very young men, mostly public servants, who had no office, and kept no records, and whose members were less than 50. This many young people had limited finance. And when Sydney members visited Melbourne, and the Melbourne group were impressed with Sydney's membership and considerable financial resources. So the Sydney group is the Knights of the Southern Cross in Sydney. And they've come down and they've met these young fellows from Melbourne. And they had a much larger membership, bold and radical proposals, and they had what you might call the sinews of war. They had the wealth. And the amalgamation was obvious and urgent and accomplished. And the meeting of the Knights of the Southern Cross in Victoria was held in Melbourne in 1922. And that's where we sort of begin our story. In July, a national conference of the Order was held in Sydney. Representatives from Western Australia, South Australia, Queensland, Victoria and New South Wales attended, and a constitution for the government of the Order was approved. So that's the beginning of the national body of the Knights of the Southern Cross, which several years later Victorians withdrew from, but we won't get to that for a little while. They drew up a short list of objectives which we still adhere to today. We call them the objects of the Order, and you'll see them on the screen. To promote the advancement of Australia, to foster the Christian way of life, to promote the welfare of its members, and to encourage social and intellectual activities among its members, to conduct and support educational, charitable, religious and social welfare. And that's still our objects. So the following branches were formed in Victoria in 1922. Branch number 1 was at Chalkley, and it was formed on the 20th of the 2nd, 1922. Middle Park, or South Melbourne, number 2, formed the same day, and number 3 was Hawthorn, which was formed the same day. Now very shortly after that, only a matter of months, a branch was formed in Ballarat, which was number 4, and number 5, Bendigo, was formed on the 7th of the 9th, 1922, and Geelong on the 1st of the 8th, Chalkley on the 22nd of the 6th, 1923, Wangaratta in 23, Kyneton in 23, and Swan Hill in 24. Now, what I think is significant, and it certainly stood out to me, was the number of the first 10 branches were in country towns. And that's the surprise, just of my personal observation of that. But obviously there was tensions in these country towns, where we sort of think mainly of in the city and in Melbourne. But, and even to much smaller country towns, I was surprised as I read through the list that there was actually a branch for a little country place called Watcham. I don't know whether you know it or not, but there must be 12 people there. In the Melbourne, yes, that's right. So you'd wonder why they named the form of branch there. They knew everybody which side you were on anyway. However, that was just a distraction. 112 Bendigo was formed in 1955, and Golden Square 113 in 1959, and then Chalkley, which was number 7, and became quite a strong branch because it was a branch of the year several times during the 1980s, I think it was. But they also had a second branch which formed in 1960. About 1959, the Bendigo district was divided into 4 branches: Branch 5, Branch 112, Branch 133, and Branch 114, which only lasted for a few years, only about 3 years, I think. Of the early branches of the 1920s, only branch number 5 survived for 90 years before it joined Branch 112 and 214 to become the one branch that we have in Bendigo today. Alright, now have a look at some of our activities. So it's essential for our branch to have the support of the priest, and therefore in return it's essential for the branches to support the formation of priests and their education. And so annually in Melbourne there's a very large function. It's a dinner, takes the form of a dinner and an auction, and it's a very enjoyable and much a very good fundraising event. And still has been supported by our branch for many years and many other branches also. Now it's an annual dinner, it's months in the planning. There are 400 members that attended the branch this year. Whoops, that's not a bad branch. Attended the dinner this year. And funds were raised through the dinner itself, through sponsorship, auctions of donated goods, and it raised about $86,000, which is a phenomenal amount for not a bad night out. It was a very enjoyable one. One of the other, so if we can move on to a number of this particular, we're now looking at some of the activities that we run in Bendigo, and a little bit about the background to them. This one is called the Sunday Family Day, and it comes out of the research findings about children and families and the parenting styles, etc., and in a sense their consequences. They talk about parents and their impact, and it's probably far greater than we seem to realise. There's something about the intimacy, the flexibility, the loyalty, the sense of belonging, support and love of a family that's the essence of being human. And families are the strongest factor in the development and maintenance of human competence. I'm quoting from research findings, so I'm not just having a guess at these. There's accumulation. The vital factor is the way the families relate to each other and to the outside world. And their parenting styles has emerged as a key social and intellectual development of young children. And this becomes very vital in the consequence. Having this information, in about 20 years ago, I presented this information to a group of people who were invited along for this meeting, members of the Knights of the Southern Cross, members of various organisations, Rotary and other organisations in Bendigo. And we presented the consequences, etc., of not attending to these things and changes in lifestyle and so on. And I proposed that we run a day of activities that feature parents and children participating together in active recreation. And so we then had to secure, we wanted all the activities to be free. In order to do that, we had to have some funding, and branches of the local branch of the Knights of the Southern Cross, plus other organisations in town, when they heard about this, and there's the usual, the sceptics, it won't work, etc. But we are funding enough to put on an afternoon full of free activities, and it was attended by around about 1,000 people. And, and you'll notice that what we really wanted to see was mum and dad engaging in activities with their children, and supporting them to do some of those activities. And you can see that the child there has been on stilts, and so the child gets up and says, "Well, Dad, you do it." And it was just such a joy. And all the activities are focused on that. And that's and every year since then, that was run one afternoon. In order to get the insurance cover, we were invited to come in under the auspices of the Eaglehawk Data and Arts, which locals would know has been an activity, a festival that's been going for about 50 years this year. And so they invited us to come in under their auspices. They supported us also, and every year we've been invited to participate. The afternoon's activities have grown to a full day activities, and the influence that this has had has been tremendous. I remember the first day, or the first or second, we were watching things unfold, and of course we were moving around doing a fair bit, but an ex-mayor of Bendigo, who happened to belong to probably in a significant position in the Masonic Lodge, he came up to me and he said, "This is going really well. This is a jewel," I love this quote, "this is a jewel in the social life of Bendigo, and I wish we had it in Bendigo." So it did. And so over the years, a lot of other, and this is the significant thing, and it's very significant, I think, to the branches of the Knights of the Southern Cross. If the activity we're running is significant to the community in which we live, then the community will take on board the influence that we have without saying we are the Knights of the Southern Cross. That activity has been copied by many other organisations. There are now lots of family days that are based on this. I know they do these because they borrow our equipment. But however, that's been going on now for a number of years, and it's still going on. So that's the Sunday Family Day. Naturally, when there are disasters, or when we are, but when there are disasters in the region, or wherever we can assist, and these are particularly related to floods in the areas of Rochester, Kerrang, Bourke, all surrounding areas where those areas were flooded out. The families were very seriously impacted. And sometimes while the floods were still on, but mostly afterwards, we would go and help rebuild. Floods or bushfires, and we'd help them rebuild their fences, rebuild their sheds, their stockyards, and generally support them. Now, in a number of cases, once the flood or the fire has gone, and we've had they've been assisted in some way, they're able to get started again. But sometimes, particularly in the case of floods and flat plains, the floods hang around for a long time, and that impacts, especially with dairy cattle. You've got dairy cattle walking through water and mud all the time. So that has a big impact on the health and welfare of the animals, but also on the health and welfare of the people. And in a few cases, if the husband got sick because of his work, there was a serious complication. So we responded to those over a long period of time. And there are a whole lot of other examples of that. But I might just keep moving along, I think, to the next one. This is one where one of our members who had a great knowledge of the local community used to run a coach tour. And he'd run a coach. We certainly went on one big coach tour where we followed the trail, went down to where Mary McKillop operated at her schools, etc. And in other areas, and they were mostly just social functions. But at the time when the floods were widespread, they affected areas like Charlton, Rochester, Winterproof, Bourke, etc. We organised a group sponsored by the Knights of the Southern Cross, our branch, and we said to the people, your bus trip is free, but when we arrive at these towns, we expect you to shop generously. So don't go looking for bargains. We're going to help these people, A, supported by the fact that we are there, and B, by supporting them financially. And so that was one of our very successful ones. And the lady in the red hat, she bought that hat, and I think she must have bought it at one of their first places, because everywhere we went, we could spot the lady with the red hat. The other function that we run is the Deb Balls, and we've been running these for about 20 years. Now here's another event that's been significant in the area. What I like about this is that it follows on from the first, when we had the Sunday Family Day, we were concerned with the effect of young people and families, and what was a positive thing to happen to them, because the first signs of the first aspects of disadvantage when kids go to school isn't what happens at school, it has already happened at home, because kids develop their intelligence by the time they're 4, by the age of 4. So if you come to school with the disadvantage of a disappointing home life, then that lasts for the rest of your life. You've heard the Prime Minister say, I had a rough background or something about a disadvantage, I had a single mother, etc. So that was one. Now the next thing is, the next time that the next important stage in their life is in their teens. And we know that teenagers love to, they sort of want approval from their parents for the activities that they do, but more importantly, they want approval from their peers. Now, if we can run an event that puts those two together, such as the Deb Balls, then we're on to a pretty good thing. And the Deb Balls were very, very successful. So much so, the first time we ran it was run by members of the Knights, and we had about 20 debutants, I suppose. And then, in a short while, we needed to run at least four nights of debutante balls to cater for all the other people who wanted to make their debut. And so here's an example of running an event which is significant to the people in the community in which we live. And if we do that, we'll get support. And then other people, other organisations have taken over, have also started to run debutante balls. And they've been running now for quite a while, and we eventually stopped running them because they were being run by the primary school kids, primary schools, who were running them for their ex-students, and so we didn't attract so many. Piscatory retreat. The Piscatory retreat, I really can't say much about this Piscatory retreat. I sort of summed it up by saying, this is an annual event where a group of like-minded members retreat to pray and play. Full stop. There's much more to it than that. But, and so these group of men go off every year. They spend quite a bit of time in prayer and meditation, and in fishing, and in fellowship. And they also, especially if they're in a camping ground, they attract the attention of a lot of other campers. And these blokes say, "What are you blokes doing over there?" And they say, "Well, we're praying. Do you want to come and join us?" And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But it is just simply one of the retreats that has been very, very successful. But just before we move from retreats, another one which has been very, very powerful is the Men Alive retreat. And the reason I sort of just throw that in as an extra one, so if you have a look at the significant events that have been run and how they link together in terms of the object of fostering our Christian way of life. The first one focused on the children at home. The next one focused on their next stage of life, the teenagers. The next one focuses on the adults, and in Men Alive it focuses on men generally and calls on them and searches to make good men better. And so that's the last of our retreats. And I've got nothing to say about Len Chalkley. I'll let you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. So for the second part, I introduce Len Chalkley to the podium.
Yep.
Please make welcome Len.
Thank you, Tom. I think I only got this job because I'm old. And secondly, I've got a good memory. Tools for Timor. This is really, it was an exciting event, this. And in 2003, the Knights embarked on a program with the Freemasons. Now we've heard about the hostility of the Freemasons and the Knights and so on, but this was one occasion when we got together and we undertook the job of collecting hand tools and garden tools to be sent to Timor, who urgently needed these tools. We asked Glenn Fitzgerald, not Len Chalkley, to oversee the collection of the tools, and his place was the collection point. Now, Len Fitzgerald at the time was a policeman in Bendigo, but he was also a qualified diesel mechanic, and his expertise in the way of renovating tools and keeping and getting them into good order was exceptional and a great boon for us. So Timor was seeking hand tools, they were not seeking power tools. Now the Knights in Bendigo collected an amazing number of hand tools, and each of those tools were delivered out to Len's place, and there they were inspected, checked to see that they were working, and many of them were rusty. And so we set about sandpapering the tools down and restoring them as far as we could to their original shape and appearance. Any tools that had movable parts were dismantled, oiled and cleaned, and returned and made sure that they were workable. We had working bees there over about 3 days, and we actually ended up collecting a trailer load of hand tools to be sent to Timor. When we delivered the tools to Melbourne, we were complimented on the condition of the tools that we presented to them, and we were told that they were the best presented tools of any in Victoria. This then was a lovely combined effort of the Knights and also the Masonic Lodge, and all in all, when all the tools were collected, we sent a container load of tools to Timor. A wonderful effort. What's next, Tom?
Collapse.
Collapse it all. From something good to something disastrous. Sorry about this. I've just got to get this date right. Yep, I just can't find it. Never mind, won't matter. Yep. So now this is the collapse of Pan Australia credit. Now in the 1980s, the Knights of Southern Cross were doing very well. We had a sound membership, and we'd moved our head office from Queen Street to a building on the corner of Elizabeth Street and Royal Parade. And the State Council were holding their meetings there. We had our workforce there, including full-time workers, and we had dining facilities, and things were going well. However, State Council decided that they should have a commercial enterprise to finance or to provide for the future of the Knights in the coming years. And so they formed an investment company called Pan Australian Credits. Now, they invited deposits from our members and from Catholic organisations. And a good deal of money was deposited in Pan Australian Credits. And so they had a very fine working capital. In the first few years, they invested the money very successfully, and Pan Australian Credits was doing nicely, and mostly they invested in buying and selling motels. In 1989, I think it was, a motel came for sale on the Gold Coast. No, I'm sorry, in the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. I think it was in Caloundra, and the purchase price of the motel was $7 million. Pan Australian Credits at that stage had $4 million on deposit, and so they borrowed $3 million from the banks and purchased the motel. The motel did not live up to expectations and was trading at a loss, and Pan Australian Credits could not afford the loss. And so they had no alternative but to put the motel back on the market. They did so, and when they did, they found that the motel was seriously overcapitalised, and instead of realising $7 million from the sale, we received $4 million. And so they had lost all of the money that was deposited in Pan Australian Credits, including the members' funds and the organisation funds. This had a disastrous effect on State Council anyway, and it had a huge effect on our members who were angry, and as you can understand, they were very angry at losing their savings. And so many of them resigned from the organisation. And so State Council then found themselves in a situation with a declining membership, which lessened their income, no serious income stream, and so they had to quit the building the premises we had in Elizabeth Street, and we had to sack our full-time workers. We were then dependent on the future of the KSC for volunteers, and we were dependent also on the charity or the generosity of a Catholic parish to house their organisation. So the collapse of Pan-Australian Credit was an absolute disaster. Shouldn't have happened, of course, like these things should never do, but it did, and it had a lasting effect. And we are now only realising, the State Council then were supported by branches who had funds, and so we contributed to keep State Council alive, and it survived all that time and survived now, and again is starting to improve the position and open new branches. A very sorry tale, one that had a disastrous effect not only on the members but on our organisation in general.
Good topic now, Len.
Fundraising and bingo, yeah, this is a good topic. Now, in 1977, Monsignor de Campo, who was administrator of St Killian's Parish, purchased St Vincent's College from the Vincentians. He purchased St Vincent's College at a purchase price of $500,000. He then asked the Maris brothers if they would staff the college, and it became a Maris College, and it was called Catholic College. It has now been renamed and is called Macaulay College, and is still run by a Maris. Monsignor de Campo decided that he needed a finance stream to pay for the cost of the campus, and so he instituted bingo in St Killian's Hall on a Thursday night every week. He asked the Knights in Bendigo if they would staff and run the bingo for him, which we did for many, many years, and we did that until the popularity of bingo declined, and so the bingo collapsed, and thanks Tom, and in all that time we had raised a huge amount of money. Monsignor was very pleased. Now, after we'd been running bingo for 3 or 4 years, Monsignor said to us that if we wanted to, we could run a mini session of bingo after the main session on a Thursday night. As it turned out, I was the permit holder for all that time. So we then ran a mini session of Bendigo until bingo ceased in St Killian's Hall. Now, we raised a lot of capital out of these bingos, and we invested it in a separate account, and we named the account the Reg Buck Memorial. Now, Reg Buck was a long-time member of our branch. He was also a prominent Catholic man, and he was in the position to have advanced knowledge of jobs that were advertising vacancies. And this gave our members an opportunity to look at those vacancies and see if any of them appealed, and it gave them the opportunity to apply for them, or for members of their family to apply for those jobs. And so we named the fund in honour of Reg Buck, the Reg Buck Memorial, and it is still the Reg Buck Memorial to this day. After some years, we built up a considerable amount of capital and were getting a reasonable return of interest. And so the branch decided that they would sponsor a child, in each of the primary schools in our area. And we had 5 primary schools in our area. We sponsored a child by giving $200 to each of the principals in the primary schools, and they chose a student from a family that was struggling, and they, with the $200, they purchased books, they purchased uniforms, and they were able to send a child on a school excursion. Excuse me a second. Now then, we amalgamated with Branch 5, and we picked up another 4 schools. So now we had 9 primary schools, and we were sponsoring a child in each of those 9 primary schools. We are still doing that, and we've done that this year, even though bingo has ceased. And so long as the money in the Bridgeback Memorial Fund continues to pay a reasonable return, we intend to keep on sponsoring the child. We know that $200 for each child is nothing great, but we still feel that it is something worthwhile, and we intend to keep on doing it. Thanks, Tom.
Yep. Gianna.
Gianna is another good story. We became, associated with the Gianna Centre when they asked our branch, would we help them set up a modern office system and a reasonable financial plan. The Gianna organisation was run by women whose aim was to socially, physically and financially support young pregnant girls and single mothers. We soon realised that the Gianna people were seriously under-financed, and they needed financial support. At the same time, the Frankston Rotary Club were running a very, very fine raffle. And instead of asking their members to sell all the tickets themselves, which would limit the number they could sell, they offered the sale of tickets to organisations like ourselves. And they did so on a very, very generous commission basis. And our branch took up the project, and in the first year of selling tickets, we raised $2,000, and we shared that with the Gianna Centre, so we gave them $1,000, and we continued to do that for some years. After a while, we felt that we could sell more tickets than we were doing, and so we did. We sold more tickets, and we raised $3,000 in commission. At that stage too, we had other means of finance for our own branch, and so we decided that we would give all of the proceeds of the raffle to the Gianna girls or organisation. And we have done that, even though bingo has stopped, and we are now relying on much less interest rates than we were before. We are still intending to support the Gianna girls to the best of our ability, and we hope it will be around $3,000. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Lynn. That's it. Thank you, Len. We heard the wonderful stories of history. As a club, I'd like to just read out the names of the life members. Some of them are not here, have gone to their maker. Joseph Brennan, Gerald Fitzpatrick, John Fitzpatrick, his wife's here today, William Walsh, Len Chalkley.
No, I'm still here.
Thank you, Len, for reminding me. John Mangan, he's still here, but he had that mishap this morning. Brian Bourke, Ian Bell, Hugh Cushing, and Morris Scan. Sorry, Morris, I have... Lovely to see you here again, Morris, as ex-chairman, state chairman of the Knights of the Southern Cross. It's lovely that you've made the journey here with Loretta today, and thank you very much for supporting our branch during the year. The 50-year members, again, John Mangan, Len Chalkley, Fred Schroeder, he's still alive. I'm not going to go through the rest of them. I'm sure you'll see some names there. To bring back some wonderful memories. Now we're going to have a 15-minute break for tea and coffee. Tea and coffee served on my left, just over here. We'll have a 15-minute break and then we'll come along and do the presentations. Thank you very much for listening.